Another episode of Firestarters. I have my friend here, Mary Comm, who is a published author, founder, and director of Uncommon Love Ministries. We're going to jump right into this because I know we've already been talking for 30 minutes. There's going to be so much gold here. You're going to want pen and paper, open your notes on your phone because there's going to be a lot of gold shared here today. I want us to go back to the beginning, Mary, and there may be a few instances in your life where you felt this, but tell us about that time that you first heard the Lord calling you out. What was that like? What did you hear? What was he calling you towards? And what was your response?
So I want to preface this by saying that I grew up in a family, great Christian family, wonderful, at least on the exterior, but there was a lot going on in the interior that nobody really knew about. But in my family dynamics, I was taught from a very young age that it was better to be silent than to be heard. Because when I spoke up, things got worse. So fast forward until I was, what age was I? I had my two kids, so it was probably in my late 30s, early 40s. I was in church and they sang this song about, it was The Voice of Truth by, not Mercy Me, who was it? I can't remember, but.
Yeah, I can't remember who did that one.
And then the sermon that day was on Gideon. And I don't know that I'd ever heard the story of Gideon before, even though I was raised in the church and probably had, but didn't remember it. But our pastor was talking about how Gideon was pressing his grapes into wine in the cellar because he was afraid. And, then, the story, the spirit or the angel of the Lord comes to him and calls him mighty warrior. And Gideon's like, yo, I am hiding away, pressing my grapes down here. You have got the wrong person. And he said, I'm the least of the least. And in the midst of that service, I felt God calling me to speak, public speaking. And, I'm an introvert. I was taught not to speak growing up. I was always happy in the shadows. I had my own ministry, but it was more of a, one-on-one type thing. And I'm like, oh, Lord, you got the wrong person. I'm the least of the, oh, shoot. And, that was life-changing for me. And I have gone back to that very often because when you're in ministry, the battle's always raging at some level or another. And I can go back to that day and say, no, the enemy was the one that was trying to keep me quiet. It was God who was telling me that he gave me a voice to speak. And so that's what I do.
I love that. So I'm hearing, there had to be so much fear, not just fear because of the battle, but even just overcoming those environmental, like the way you were raised to just be silent. I can't even imagine the self-talk that you had probably going on when you did those first few times step out to speak. Tell us about that. Okay. Am I wrong?
No. So I think it was the very first time. So you have to understand my ministry was it was surrounding the abortion issue. So it was for women who were abortion minded and women who had abortions and needed healing and to be loved on. So many abortion ministries are more about the wrongness of abortion, or at least they used to be. I'm talking back in the old days because I've been around for a while. But so, and my experience with abortion was I was an accomplice to an abortion. I never had one. But what happened was one of my best friends had gotten pregnant in just a bad situation. She and her boyfriend had already broken up when she found out she was pregnant. And, I was so silenced by my growing up that I was afraid of offending my friend. So I encouraged her to, when she would dream about having a baby, but when she talked about having the abortion, I couldn't say anything.
Mm.
And so when I became pregnant with my first child, God really brought that instance to, he brought me to reckoning, because what I did, people told me for years, that wasn't your fault. That was her decision and all that. And I'm like, that's not what God convicted me of. God convicted me of putting my friendship with my friend above the life of her child.
Mm.
So fast forward to my very first speaking engagement. I was in front of 45, 50 women, all post-abortive.
Okay.
And I start sharing my story. And there's this moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I represent in each one of their lives the person that didn't stand by them. And I just started bawling. I could barely get through it, So it was, on my drive home that day, I was like, okay, I still have some healing to do here.
But how
Um,
amazing that you were so aware of your audience, of who they were, and serving
yeah.
them, that you made that
Mm-hmm.
connection of who they were thinking about and what they were going through in their mind as they listened to you. And that's what a good speaker does. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about you. Your attention is completely on who you're
Mm-hmm.
speaking. So
Right.
your
Right.
first ministry was related to abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have that ministry?
So actually, my first two. So my first one was it was when the internet was new. So it was 1996, and it was like an online pregnancy center type of thing. So I had articles on there about the reality of abortion. For those who are abortion minded. The potential consequences, probable consequences, because God had really given me a behind the scenes view, of what it was like with my friend. So. And then for the women who had had abortions and regretted them and needed healing. So, and I have to tell you this too. So, I had served briefly in a ministry in the late 80s. And then I had my kids, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was praying, Lord, what do I want to do something with my time. I need to be, effective and doing something, more than just taking care of my kids. Not that that wasn't enough, but I wanted to be able to stay home with them. Anyway, so I had written this article on my healing journey from being that accomplice to that abortion. And my husband at the time had posted that on his website because he was very keyed into all that internet stuff already. And I got an email from a woman in response to that article. And she said, Mary, I've had an abortion. And she said, there's nowhere for me to turn.
Yeah.
She said, the people who are against abortion don't want to hear that I've had one. And the people that are pro-abortion don't want to hear that I'm sorry for it.
Mm.
And I will never forget that moment because it was like the heavens opened up and
Mary,
this light, and it was like, oh my gosh, Lord, this is what you want me to do.
mm-hmm.
I can love on these women and give them a safe place. So my first ministry was called Safe Haven Ministries. And, I, uh, I cut my ministry teeth on that ministry, but, I did it for 4 years. And because it was online, it was a 24/7 kind of thing. And I had women who were addicted to all kinds of stuff, alcohol, drugs, all that kind of stuff. They were cutting, they were suicidal, they were depressed, just all those things, all the symptoms of post-abortion stress, And even when we went on vacation, I was there, answering, responding to people. We had a chat room, we had a message board, all that kind of stuff. So after about 4 years, I'm like, I need a break. So for the summer, I asked one of my volunteers, very godly, amazing, wonderful friend. She's still a friend now, but I said, would you take over the ministry for me this summer? And she said, let me pray about it. Obviously she did. Anyway, when it was time for me to come back, I said, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. Would you like to take this over? So she did, and she ran it for years until I can't even remember what year it was. And then about 3 years later, God started calling me back into that ministry. And I was like, no, 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 I don't want to go back to Nineveh, because I was sitting in my bed one day, just bawling my eyes out, in the middle of the day. And my husband comes in, he says, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't want to go back to Nineveh. you know?
Find yourself in a fish
So it
if you
took,
don't.
yeah, right. So it took about 8 months. And God finally got through to me. I'm like, okay, fine. If you want me to come back to this ministry, you need to open a door for me at my church. And so I went to one of the pastors, or one of the deacons actually, who was my small group leader, and I told him about my calling and everything, and he said, you need to speak to so and so. Like, okay, Lord, I know what he's going to say. I'm going to get the good on you. That's great. Go and have a wonderful ministry. We're praying for you, kind of thing. And I walked in and I sat down and I started talking to him, and he said, Mary, I have lots of experience in that area. And he said, we need to do something together.
Wow.
Great. God said, you wanted a door, Mary, here it is.
Wow.
So at that point, I started In Our Midst Ministries, because we have all these hurting women and families. Abortion hurts everybody, not just the woman who has the abortion. It hurts the kids, it hurts the husband, it hurts the grandparents. It's like ripples on a pond. It affects everybody that it touches. And so it was called In Our Midst Ministries, because we have all these people in our midst that are hurting from this, and they have no safe place to turn to. And so I started directing my efforts toward the church and helping them create ministries that were tailored to their congregations for abortion recovery. And yeah, so I did that for about 10 years.
That is such a needed, ongoing, needed ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So many people. I mean, everyone knows someone, if not multiple people, who are
Absolutely.
Yes.
When I calculated the demographics one time, if it touches everybody, in the family system, it actually ended up being more people than there are in the country.
I can imagine so.
Because people are affected by multiple. If you have 3 abortions in the family from, sisters say they all have abortions, then, I mean, look at how that ripples out.
Yeah.
So it's still a huge issue. And, even though, I mean, I'm so proud of the people that are still working in that field of ministry, because they have made a lot of progress in that field. And it thrills my heart. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, it's like, oh, I cannot believe I got to see that.
Yes. Yes, to be alive when it happened. I've heard it said before that we are most equipped to help the person that we once were. And that's where that ministry came out for you, is your experience.
Yeah.
And then even now, the ministry you have now, Uncommon Love. Tell us, how did that ministry start? When were you called? Tell us that story.
So, oh gosh. So in 2013, my husband and I, after 24 years of marriage, pulled the plug. Not my choice, but it, just happened. Anyway, at that point, I stepped away from ministry because I had a lot of healing to do. And 3 years later, I mean, I had lost both my parents, moved like 2 or 3 times. Just, you imagine it. I had a really serious car accident, all this kind of stuff. And in the midst of my healing, trying to heal. And in 2016, my 21-year-old daughter at the time told me that she was bisexual. And I did not see that coming. And, it really knocked my feet out from under me. I mean, for probably 6 weeks, I was just in a fog. I was just stunned. And when that kind of fell away, then I just hit the floor on my knees. And I'm like, God, I cannot do this by myself. I mean, I've been in ministry for almost 20 years at that point, and I know the word. I know God. I walked with him. He's been amazing to me and healed me in so many areas. And yet I knew that I couldn't do this on my own. So I started looking for help, in my area. It took a week just to get into my pastor. Not even my pastor. He was the church counselor.
Wow.
No pastors called me, And by then I kind of had my feet up under me. At least I was standing upright. But, I started realizing there wasn't a lot out there for parents. There are a number of ministries for people wanting to come out of that lifestyle, but there just wasn't much for parents. So actually what happened was I just started learning about the issue in every way that I could, so I could know how to interact with my daughter and not compromise my faith, but not, blow up our relationship either, which I did in full honesty.
All moms do at some point. It's a mom thing. It's a mom thing.
It's like a sermon, and I'm like, ooh, I need to do that. And so I, wrote out this letter to my daughter telling her, this is not who God made you to be. This is not who you are. This is sin, I think I probably said. But I read it to her so she could see my heart, And she was so angry with me. I mean, and my daughter knows me. She knew I was going to stand in that place, So after that, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. I don't even know how to have an honest relationship with my daughter, because I can never affirm this. I can never celebrate this in her life, So that's when I really started diving deep. And so I started changing how I interacted with her. And she said to me one day, she said, Mom, I think you could help other Christian parents. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And
Wow.
to be fair, she doesn't remember saying that now. And secondly, I don't think she understood fully where I was coming from, which is
Right.
part of what I love about the compassion without compromise viewpoint. Is I could show compassion for her and love on her and be there for her and still be her mom, and yet not affirm her lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing led to another, and I decided, I'm going to start a small group in my living room, because I've done small groups. Piece of cake, this not necessarily on this topic, but I know how to do the actual small group thing. So I put together some materials on how I wanted this group to look and how it would function, all that kind of stuff. And I shared it with a friend of mine who also had a lesbian daughter. And unbeknownst to me at the time, she took it to her boss, who was the care pastor at her church.
Oh.
And she called me later that day and she said, my boss is the care pastor here, and he wants to bring this ministry here. He said, she said, would you drive up here and lead this class here? And I'm like, I'll pray about it, and I had told God already, you open the doors, I'm going to walk through them.
Right.
I'm like, I guess this is an open door, isn't it? So that was how this ministry got started. It was out of my own experience, out of my own pain. And I was just 6 months into this journey when I started that group. And I had 12 other parents in the room that were hurting and all at different stages of grief, and some of them were affirming, some of them were in shell shock. I mean, so it was trial by fire. But it was that summer I wrote the book because I knew we needed a biblical foundation for the group, and the best way to do that is to put it in a book. So that's how my book came to be.
Yes. Hold up your book. I love the cover of the book. Uncommon. Yes. Yes. God's heart for Christian parents of gay kids.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it's a
good.
Bible study, so it's primarily about us as parents. It's about where God stands on this issue, and how He loves this community, and He loves the parents that are dealing with it. It talks about where those inclinations come from, and they're all wounds. They're all wounds.
Yes.
And then it's about how do we as parents navigate this journey with our kids in a world that celebrates what breaks our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So again, your experience
mm-hmm,
qualifies you. But I love how in this moment of, heartbreak,
mm-hmm,
you it's just who God has made you to be, Mary. You gather your resources. And not
mm-hmm,
only do you gather your resources and have a vision for what this can look like in your life to create healing and navigate, but you open the door to offer it to others. You know that there are others based on your experience. I think sometimes it's the biggest thing. We have our experience and we think we're the only one. Or even if we have a heart to help others, we think, well, I'm not qualified. I can't do it. I'm too broken.
mm-hmm,
And I don't know
yeah,
where I'm going. This just happened in my life. But
mm-hmm,
it's those very things. It's Moses. I think of Moses, he committed murder, he'd run
yep,
away, he's broken, he's not the
mm-hmm,
man. On paper, he
right,
is not the man. But God says, everything in your life has made you exactly the man that I
mm-hmm,
need. And I have people who will be with you. You had
mm-hmm,
that pastor in your second ministry
yep.
come alongside you. So he always has someone. What have been the challenges, especially I want to know in regards to your family, because you mentioned your husband, you mentioned in your first two ministries, the time that you put towards it. I know
Mm-hmm,
all ministry, it takes all of us, right? It
yeah,
takes all of who we are
yeah,
and it impacts our family. And your daughter, I'm sure, knows about your ministry, which is
yes.
completely, not affirming her lifestyle. She's like, my mom's entire life is built right now on the
And
fact
I
that
wrote the book on it.
and she has written a book on it, actually books. So I would love to know some of the initial challenges or the challenges you've experienced throughout starting these ministries. Because stepping out into this, Mary, you could have been a stay-at-home mom, living quietly, being just the nice lady next door with the kids, right? Like so many of us, but you did not, you answered his call. So tell us about the challenges.
The challenges have been many. I mean, so for example, when I first was invited to that church, of course I knew I had to talk to my daughter about it, and honestly, that's one of the requirements I have for any of my facilitators that want to facilitate this Bible study under Uncommon Love. I mean, anybody can lead it with this book, but if they want to work, with me and under the Uncommon Love banner, then they have to talk to their kids first and let them know this is what I'm doing. And, the way that I instruct them on how to have that conversation is what we're trying to do is to help repair the breach between kids and their parents when they disagree on these issues. And it's to preserve their relationships or repair them. And when you say that, how is anybody going to say no? But when I first shared with my daughter, I've been invited to do this at our church, in the town where you graduated from high school. And she said, I don't care what you do, Mom. And I said, well, I'm sure to run into people that know you. She said, I don't care who knows. And I'm like, okay. And then when I wrote the book, I'm like, okay, I've written this book, babe. I said, are you okay if it's published? And She said, I don't care what you do. She said, but can I read it? And I said, I wouldn't recommend it.
My
We have a very open relationship, I will say, but funny story too. About 4 years later, we were in the process of moving out of state. And so her apartment lease was up. So she moved in with me for a couple of months and she was working from home. So she was using my office and my books are right there. And she picked one up. She thought, it's been a few years. I can look at this now. And a couple of days later, we were out running errands and went to dinner. And I said, babe, if something's bothering you, you just need to talk to me. I'm here for you. If anything's troubling you, or because I could tell by her demeanor, she was just in a bad mood that day. And so I said that to her, not knowing that I was the source of her anger. So we're sitting in this restaurant and she is blasting me. I mean, how dare you? How could you, just, and I'm like, this is interesting, but what was really amazing in that challenge, speaking of challenges, is that God just He has given me this confidence in His word, in who He is, in His calling on my life, His calling on my daughter's life.
mm-hmm.
She has a calling on her life. She belongs to Him. She does not belong to herself, as we
Right.
all who have trusted Christ for our salvation. So I just sat there and I took it. And she finally took a breath. And I said, babe, I said, there are some people in your community that would say, I have to change who I am in order to make you happy. And I said, that is never okay. One person should never have to change who they are so somebody else is happy.
Yes.
And she just kind of looked down and she was scowling. I said, you don't have a right to be angry with me about this. And she said, I'm just angry at the situation. I'm like, okay, Lord, that was a win, because I walked away unscathed. She eviscerated me in public and I walked away unscathed, but because of the confidence that God has given me. And that's the confidence that I try to pass on to the parents that I minister to, because, we're so afraid of being called homophobic or, whatever, and being castigated. I've been called out in a Christian Bible study as being a homophobe. And it was kind of an out of body experience because I wasn't expecting it.
You're like,
But my
I
friend,
live with my daughter and I love her. I'm not scared of
yes,
her at all, right?
it's like I tell people, I love this community. I love my daughter. She is not a bad person. She's a hurting person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not loving to not tell people the truth.
Right.
We have to, I tell parents, because this is what I was taught when I first was on this journey. Have the conversation with your child once. This is where I stand. You know me. I've raised you on biblical principles. This is who I am. This is my identity. At the same time, especially if they're an adult, you're an adult. You get to make your choices, and I get to make my choices.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my train of thought, but we don't have to change who we are. Either one of us. I'm going to love you right where you are, and I hope you will do the same.
Yes. Yes.
So that's what we really try to teach these parents: is you don't have to kowtow to anything that the world says, because we have the God of the universe. We're on His side. We're on the right side of this.
Right.
But it's confidence with humility, and it's confidence with compassion.
Yes.
And that's what the world misses.
Right. That is so good. That is so good. And I love that you have that peace of God, which transcends all understanding and guards your heart and mind through Christ Jesus. That's exactly
Yes,
what
one
you
of my
have.
favorite verses.
Yes, me too. And because I cling to it sometimes.
Yes.
So challenges and then sacrifices. I'm curious about some of the sacrifices you've had to make along the way as you've answered His call.
Well, I've lost friends over it. I've I've left churches over it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have been called out as a homophobe and, those kinds of things. Financially, I'm trusting the Lord. I work part time for my church, and my former husband is helping out some because he says you're the mother of my children, and so he wants to help.
Wow.
But God has really taken care of me, and this is what I really have to keep going back to, is that God is my husband. He is my provider. He is my protector. And he's called me to this, and I'm in this for as long as he wants me in this. And, I have a vision of someday my daughter working alongside me in this ministry and sharing her testimony, you know, of how he redeemed her out of this, and how we did navigate this really difficult. I mean, and that's the other thing. My daughter and I have a good relationship. It's not without hardships and heartbreaks, you know. But she knows that she can depend on me anytime. She knows I'm always here for her. And even though I don't agree with her lifestyle, and she says she's a lesbian now, not bisexual, and um, it's hard. It is hard, but God continually gives me um, just confirmations, and he blesses me. It's like the last group that I led at was online. um was it last spring? No, it was last fall. The most amazing group of women, the most beautiful moms and mom hearts. And it's like I have so many friends because of this ministry, because we have locked arms and marched forward in what is, an anathema to the world. I mean,
Yes.
we are repulsive to the world.
Mm-hmm.
That we have created a safe community that, it transcends what the world is saying, what the world is doing. And lots of sweet relationships have come out of this. So God is good at the end of the day.
He is, and he set you up as a light on the hill,
Mm-hmm.
for others to see. I love that. I think all of us have this. I believe that God puts calling in everybody's hearts. I believe
Absolutely.
that. And I also have come to believe that that calling is most directly related to our life experiences.
Absolutely.
Yes. And not that he created them to happen, but that he allowed them to happen, knowing that he would work through them, and most especially work through them for the goodness of others and for his glory,
Mm-hmm.
if we would choose to answer his call.
Absolutely.
And so go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, it's not just our experiences that we've been through, it's the experiences that we've been through and the healing that he has done in our lives, you know. And you mentioned something earlier I was going to speak to about, when my daughter first came out. One of the first thing I thought of was, what did I do to mess up my daughter?
Uh,
It's all my fault. I'm a mom. And then the second thing was, how can I ever do ministry again? I'm not qualified with this, you know. And of course, that was just the enemy. But because I mean, like you said, Moses had a murder in his background, Thank God that he gave us models of, people in scripture, even the giants that were, David fell,
yes, many times.
many times. And so it's not about being perfect. It's about recognizing what you've done, how you've messed up, repenting, reconciling with God in those areas, and letting him heal those broken places. And he does bring beauty from ashes. That's one of my favorite ones too. Isaiah 61:3, and out of the ashes of my life, he has brought so much beauty. And it has very little to do with me. I am just the vessel. That's how I view myself. I am a vessel, like my water glass, you know. I'm the vessel. He fills it up. He does the work. I just show up, as clean as possible because we want to, drink from a clean glass, right?
Right.
But yeah, it comes. I mean, it's Romans 8:28. He can bring good from the worst that we have to offer when we surrender that to him. And when
Yes.
we walk through whatever healing he has for us, then, if I was still completely broken, I wouldn't be able to do this, and you spoke of challenges. One of the other challenges, I'm a mercy person. I'm a compassion person. So, even especially in my first ministry, and that's why I burned out so fast, was I took everybody's pain on
Mm.
myself and I carried it. So, I had to learn to carry their pain when I'm with them and then to hand it to God when they're not with me,
That's
It's like,
good.
okay, I can't carry everybody's pain. But you spoke to this too, that everything that I learned and went through in my previous ministries set me up for this ministry. There's so many similarities between homosexuality, transgenderism, all that stuff, and the way society views it and handles it as it
Hmm.
was with the abortion issue,
Yes,
you know?
they do run politically,
Yes.
culturally, very, yeah.
And even in the churches are silent still, very, very much on abortion, and not so much on the wrongness of abortion, but on the populations that's been wounded. It's like, how do you churches, I think, still by and large don't know how to call out sin while still loving the sinner and
Yeah.
offering them hope and redemption. Why is that so hard? I don't understand. But
Yeah. That is why our friend's ministry, Andrea Crum with Genuine Family
yes,
Ministries, and her curriculum, Truth and Love, is so, so good. It's so needed.
I love
I,
her.
I do too. I do too. All these fire starters. And so I keep coming back though to here you are, stay at home mom.
Mm-hmm.
There is such a pull, and I'll speak for me, to stay in our comfort,
Mm-hmm.
to stay, to shrink back, to get distracted. I mean, when you're raising
Mm-hmm.
kids, life is busy and there's a ton of little things that
Mm-hmm.
need to get done, have to get done. It
Yep.
is so easy and can almost become our default to say, well, I don't have the time and I'm not qualified. And of course, in our world, the qualifications is be perfect, beyond, the other side of this or having never touched it.
Mm-hmm.
And here you were, busy as ever,
Mm-hmm.
with a habit of shrinking back,
Mm-hmm.
and you chose to answer that call.
Yeah.
There been times where you've doubted the path that you've chosen or your decision to answer the
No,
call?
no. Because, when God calls you to something, and you step into that thing, he confirms in so many ways that this is, all the open doors. I mean, there were plenty of shut doors too, and I've kind of learned that I'll walk through the open doors, and some of the closed doors I'll knock for a while, but I have my limit. I'm not going to waste my time on the closed doors. I'm going to keep looking for those open doors. But yeah, I mean, it's the the doubts come throughout, but not the doubts that I'm on the right path. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like the enemy is always there. It's like last night I had the first meeting of a new group, and I was just not on my game, you know, and it just, I am human, and um, I just was not, I did not feel like I was on my game. And I kind of beat myself up for that a little bit, and um, I'm not going to question my calling. I'm just going to question, why was I not on my game?
Mm.
And what precipitated that. So yeah, I don't question my calling. I always have questions. Like right now I'm questioning, is my job taking me away from the ministry calling that God has placed on my life? And what do I do about that? I love my job. I love the people that I work with, and being able to support the pastors in my church. And it's those are the questions, but not my calling. This is my calling. So
I love that. I assume that would be your answer, but what I want our listeners to hear, and I think you just touched on it, is it's not going to be a perfect road, like smooth
mm-hmm.
sailing. It's not going to be without challenges and sacrifices. It's not going to be without confusion sometimes, or these moments of where you're at a crossroads, like, which direction do you want me to go, Lord?
Mm-hmm.
But it is good. It is
Yes.
still good when he's with you. I would choose, as challenging as this path has been for me, leaving teaching after 20 years
Mm-hmm.
and taking the risk and
Mm-hmm.
doing what my parents said don't do. I wouldn't go back. I would
Right.
not go back, because I wouldn't be in alignment with who he's called me to be. And
Yeah.
that weighs on you. It sits on you when you know you're
Mm-hmm.
not stepping into who he's called you to be. And there's only so much running, there's only so much Netflix you can watch, you know, um, or alcohol you can drink, or
Oh,
whatever
God.
it
Good.
is, you know. Thank
Mm-hmm.
goodness I don't have that. But I mean, we all have our coping skills when we're trying to run from the voice of God.
Yeah.
And, but that weighs more than the journey to follow his calling. I'm curious, what advice would you give to somebody if you could go back in time,
Mm-hmm.
2013,
Mm-hmm.
to you? What would you say to your former self? How would you encourage her?
Well, I felt really during those first few years after my divorce, I felt like I was like I should have been out working. I had maintenance at the time, and it was sufficient to pay for my monthly expenses. So so I made the choice to stay home and heal, and to work on myself, and to, because I was really, really, really broken after that divorce. And so I beat myself up for being lazy, and not working. But I was working. And when I look back, it's like, during our separation, in the first year of our divorce, it took a year. That year, um, I got I went back and got my degree
Mm-hmm.
in psychology, which that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. But
Right?
because it's a bachelor's, But I
Yeah.
went back to college, which really, literally saved my life, I think, during that time. But so for 3 years, I was in college, or 2 years, and then after the divorce, um, I got my coaching certification, so I'm a certified professional life coach. And I wrote the book and started this ministry. So it's like, in the last 10 years, I have not worked much in the world in traditional jobs, but I've accomplished a lot, But what I would say to myself is, stop beating yourself up. You're right where God wants you to be.
Mm.
And He orders our paths, and He directs our paths when we are pressing into Him. And boy, when you're healing, the only way to heal is to press into Him,
Yes.
and to depend on Him, and let Him strip away all the stuff that got you wounded in the first place, So, yeah, I would say you should have been gentler with yourself during those years. Um, but he's been so good and so faithful, and I don't regret any of the the ministry steps I've taken. I mean, I was sharing with my son this morning that, we were talking about how to hear the voice of God. And when we think we've heard and it still goes horribly wrong. And I had one of those, and it was kind of big. I opened an abortion recovery center in the town that I lived in, because I wanted to provide more support for those women and families. And it failed, but I had sought God and I had talked to my husband. He's like, yeah, go for it. And I'm like, okay, that was confirmation.
Right?
And not that it was a mistake, but sometimes even our failures, I mean, I say failure is a wonderful teacher,
Yes.
so it's all good. It's all good.
It played a part somehow. You learned from that, right? You either succeed or you learn is really the two options, right?
Well, and if nothing else, I raised awareness in my community. I mean, I had a bus sign, and they did an article on me in the paper, an interview in our local town, and so I raised awareness, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
So who knows? But it's a wobbly walk, is what I call it.
I
You
like
know,
that.
it looks a little bit like a drunken stupor sometimes.
But doesn't that keep us so tethered to
Humble
Christ?
and
Yeah.
humble.
Yes, and humble. Mary, I have to ask you this. How much of your healing has come through your service?
Oh gosh. I would say I'm in a continual state of healing.
Mm.
Um, because, I talked about stripping away, having God strip away all those things that got us wounded in the first place. Absolutely. Whenever God uses you to impact somebody else's life, it has to be beneficial to our souls.
Mm.
And for me, it is. I was a Gideon. I am a Gideon. I was the least of the least. And I'm just little Mary, but I get to impact lives for Christ and families. And, one of the ladies said last night in my group, she said, Mary, I just want to be like you and be thankful that God brought this to me, this situation in my life. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't go that far. And I always say, I never in a million years would have chosen this ministry.
Mm.
But
Neither would have Moses.
I'm thankful that God does take the ashes of our lives and turn them into something beautiful.
Mm.
And getting to see, when moms come in that first night, moms and dads, because I do couples too, and men will come into the group. But that first night, there are a lot of tears and pain and heartache. And by chapter 10, they are laughing and they're confident and they're equipped, and there's a real transformation. And I even said to them last night, I said, y'all remember how you feel tonight, because in 10 weeks, you're going to feel different. And that transformation is so amazing to see. I get to sit on the front row and see God change other people's life. He does it. I don't do it. It's not about me. It's not even about the book. It's about what he does in their lives when they surrender to him and when they have those conversations with others that are safe. So
I think about the void that would be here if you weren't willing to answer his call. Just the lives, the goodness of others in his glory. That ignites me. That inspires me. That's the purpose of this podcast, to hear
yes.
these. Yes. And so whatever is, I know that I say this all the time. There is a mama listening right now, washing dishes, folding clothes, what have you, maybe shaving her legs in the bathtub because people, and she's got one earbud in. And
Uh-huh.
in this moment, she's saying, I can be a Mary. I feel like a Gideon. I feel like a Gideon
Mhm.
and small and not qualified, but there is
Scared.
a desire. There is this pull inside of me. And I would encourage what our good friend Andrea Crum said to me is, what's the first step? What's the
Yep.
first step he's calling you to? You don't have to worry about the results or transformation or writing a book, but what is that very next step? And go be about that. Go be about that next step. Mary. Mm,
That is one of my favorite analogies to use. When Joshua had just taken over from Moses, his very first test was the Jordan River, crossing the Jordan River at flood stage.
yeah,
And what did he
perfect.
tell the priests? God said they need to step into the flood. They need to step into the river, and then I will part the water.
Mm,
So it's taking that first step, even though it looks like you're stepping into peril. You're stepping into water, a river at flood stage. But man, when we take that first step,
mhm.
then he's like, all right, let's go.
That is very good. I just got chills on that. That is such a
Me
good point.
too.
I'd forgotten that it was just such a bad situation. And to think, I've been in the Jordan River, to think that they had to put their feet in it. I mean, they
Yes.
knew. And Jewish people, by the way, don't love water on the whole. That's what I learned
Right.
from the
Mm-hmm.
archaeologist who was a Jewish archaeologist in Israel. He
Mm-hmm.
told me, he's like, we're not big water people.
Yep.
Being asked to step into the water, that's so good. Mm.
Well, and they were carrying the ark.
I
You
know
know,
they couldn't touch. They couldn't like.
that's right.
I'd be like, all right, I've got the pole. I'm not.
Uh-huh.
Don't fall over. Don't touch it with your elbow. Don't be
Mm-hmm.
wobbly. It's a wobbly walk.
Yes. Yes.
But the Lord, He was there and He steadied them.
Mhm.
He made a way. Where can people find you, Mary? Because I know they're going to want to find you.
So I'm on Facebook. If you look up Uncommon Love, I think it says Uncommon Love Online, but you'll be able to find it. It's got a tree. I love our logo because it's this green tree with the branches in the middle are LGBTQ colors, rainbow colors. But also our website is it's uncommonlove.online. Very easy. So we're there. The book is on Amazon. And again, it's Uncommon Love, God's Heart for Christian Parents of Gay Kids by Mary Comm. You can get it at Barnes& and Noble, Amazon, anywhere really. And I recommend it to anybody who has an LGBTQ identifying child or grandchild, or, even if you're a friend of somebody with that situation in their family, you can support them if you take the time to do this study. And it is a study. I mean, you can just read it as a book if you want to, but um, it's good stuff. And I say that in all humility because I look at it sometimes, I'm like, did I write that? you know?
So,
So
man,
God is good, and he does direct our paths. So,
mm.
and I
Well,
have a podcast too. Mine's on Spotify and it's called Love Notes.
okay. So, love note, and I'll put all of this in the show notes. Love notes, Uncommon Love Ministries, the book, all of it. Don't worry, friends. We're going to set you up. You'll have all the links so that you can go find her. Thank you for today. Thank you for being a fire starter and igniting us and
Mm.
for answering God's call. Um,
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.
I appreciate
We
it.
need to do this again and step forward because I have a feeling, number one, there's more books
Yeah.
and your ministry is just going to grow.
Yeah.
Feeling.
As the Lord wills.